Hello, everyone. I'm Scott Bass with Edmund Optics, bringing you our next episode of Light Talk, where we break down trends from some of the best technical experts in the optics industry. And never did I expect in my wildest dreams that I'd get these two amazing experts in the same room together with me. I'm here with two very respected and very talented optical experts here at Edmund Optics. First, we have Kasia Sieluzycka, Senior Solutions Engineer, which means all she does is work with customers on solving problems. She has a master's degree in optical engineering from the University of Arizona and has been with Edmund Optics for 10 years. Hello, Kasia. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Scott. Nice to be here.
Great. And then we have another special guest, Nick Smith, Business Development Manager for Laser Optics. Nick has an optics degree from the University of Rochester, has been with Edmund Optics for 6 years, and has 15 years experience in operation and sales within the industry, so he knows a lot. So Nick, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.
But by the way, you have a really cool background there with that lighting. You must be an optics guy, huh?
Yeah, might as well do something while we're at home.
Yeah. Anyway, Nick, let's start with you. So you work with lasers, correct? I'm just the marketing guy. I'll admit it. I don't have the technical expertise you both do. I mean, to be honest, when I think of lasers, I think of Star Wars. I think of laser pointers when presenting. And I think of those cheesy 90s movies where someone is squeezing in themselves in between laser beams in order to steal whatever they're stealing in some crazy security system. But I'm assuming those applications are not really what you're focused on. So tell me more about your work with lasers.
Yeah, so those are definitely some applications of lasers. We do work in some of those spaces, like the defense space with directed energy and stuff like that.
So that's a real thing, huh?
It is a real thing.
Wow.
But there's a lot more to lasers than just science fiction and even science fiction bordering reality. So in addition to some of those that you mentioned, we also see a lot of work in spaces like materials processing, so metal welding or metal cutting with lasers, free space optics. So this kind of goes back to the Star Wars thing, but from a communication standpoint. So if you think about all the companies that are using space internet, they're shooting lasers around different satellites in space and then down to Earth, and that's how we're getting internet in some cases. I already mentioned defense, and a couple other spaces that you don't commonly associate with lasers are aesthetic lasers, so tattoo removal, skin rejuvenation, and of course the biomedical field, it uses a lot of lasers.
Yeah, it's interesting. So when you say biomed, and obviously recently experiencing a global pandemic, we all learned a lot over the past year and a half and gained a lot of personal interest in biomedical because of this. So can you elaborate more about how optics work in biomedical?
Yeah, so you mentioned the pandemic. The pandemic was a huge boom for laser optics, in particular around COVID testing. So a lot of those detection systems use different filters that are really focused on a specific wavelength of light to do their detection. So when we typically associate lasers, we associate them with high power. And that's just not the case. There are actually a lot of systems that use low power, but they're very focused on a specific wavelength. And the COVID filters, the COVID detection fell into that category. And we just saw a huge increase for demand for those types of filters.
Yeah. And Nick, one thing that I was really impressed with is how quickly those biomedical companies really pivoted to use their instruments for COVID detection, which was a brand new virus. I mean, we talk a lot about how quickly the vaccine came out, but also the testing came out really quickly, if you think about it. And so really that's been kind of going along with a trend that we've been seeing for a little while now, where companies, instead of making systems that do one thing and do only that one thing very well, and then when, they need to test something different, they need to build a whole new system. Really, there's been a trend towards a lot more modularization, so that you can use part of your system and then have add-ons and tweak only small parts of it to really be able to come out with new products much quicker to market. And so, one thing that's been happening a lot is, for example, systems that traditionally only used like single wavelengths or narrow bands for diagnostics, such as flow cytometers, are now also integrating imaging. And the opposite is happening too. So traditionally imaging-based systems, such as fundus cameras, are now also incorporating a diagnostics element and adding more. So we're now seeing fundus cameras that also have OCT. And so that's definitely been, a trend we're seeing, kind of doing more with using as much of the same elements as possible.
Huh. So Kasia, that's very interesting. Now, what does this all mean for Edmund Optics as an optical component supplier?
So that means that in particular, the coatings, for example. So a lot of these systems might still be using a lot of the same optics trains and optics paths, but now instead of just having, let's say, visible light going through it, you also have some near IR for some special detection or added capability. And so that means that coatings that before could just work in the visible now have to work in the visible and the near IR, sometimes hitting a lot more key wavelengths than they used to before. And that really means that you need better and better coating technologies, and there's more trade-offs to play with. And so I really enjoy that kind of work because that means, I get to have fun, and just visible coatings are, that's run of the mill, that's boring. So give me a challenge.
Glad you're having fun. Thanks, Kasia. So you are both in the trenches every day. What other trends are you seeing out there?
Yeah, so it's interesting. As we start coming out of the pandemic and everything, we're starting to see a pretty big uptick in the manufacturing sector again. So we're kind of echoing what we're seeing from the big laser manufacturers like Coherent and Trumpf and IPG, where people are pushing to higher and higher LDT and faster pulses, or shorter and shorter pulses, I should say. And kind of along the same lines, we're seeing an uptick in elective surgeries specifically. So I mentioned tattoo removal. We're starting to see upticks in that sector, and eye surgeries as well. And in eye surgery, one of the things that we're seeing is shorter and shorter pulse lengths to do those cataract surgeries or those corrective eye surgeries. So it's really fun to watch as we keep pushing limits, and it's good to see manufacturing sector bouncing back.
Good. So Nick, I have to ask, you keep bringing up LDT, which if you can please explain to everyone, that means the acronyms are a bit too much for me, at least.
Yeah, so LDT is laser damage threshold. It's also called LIDT, laser induced damage threshold. And basically it's the capability of an optical component or a thin film coating to resist damage from laser pulses. So a high LDT can typically withstand higher energies going through that component without exploding or having a catastrophic failure.
Okay. So from what I do know about LDT and short pulses, which you mentioned, we at Edmund Optics, recognizing the importance of this, made a strategic decision to invest heavily in these areas. And we went as far as to acquire a new company in Florida, QTF, which is now our new Edmund Optics Florida facility, where we specialize in these technologies, correct?
Correct. So while Edmund has always had laser optics capabilities in some fashion, typically around our Barrington manufacturing site, they did have the ability to do thin film deposition with limited power requirements. The EO Florida acquisition really just catapulted us forward to be able to better support the market by offering quite a big jump in laser damage threshold, or LDT, in addition to being able to better support the ultra-fast optics community with low GD coatings in-house.
Good. All right. Well, thanks, Nick. Now, Kasia, I imagine this changes, hopefully enhances how we are now able to support our customers, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the past, there would definitely be a subset of requirements that our customers would come to us with, especially on the high laser damage threshold side, where we just didn't, we didn't have those capabilities in-house. And so we didn't have a good solution. And several years back, we didn't even have the expertise. And so, we just had to say no to those optics and to those customers. And so, that always hurts for me, because I like helping customers. So this has been QTF acquisition has been really great in expanding our capabilities and allowing us to, help our customers with all kinds of coatings that before we just couldn't.
Okay, great. Thanks, Kasia. Okay, so in closing, what advice do you both have for people watching? These technologies are getting more advanced, more complicated. I'm imagining more expensive too, no?
Yeah. So my biggest piece of advice is try to get your optics supplier involved early and often. We're finding that more and more systems are starting to push up against manufacturing limits and even some theoretical limits for coding design. So it's better to work those out before you have a product established than to have a fully developed system and then find out that, hey, we can't actually make that in production. So involve your coding engineers, your manufacturing engineers as early and often as possible in your development stages.
Yeah, definitely. The early part is also really important right now. As some of you might have seen, all lead times are really long right now for a lot of things. I'm sure you guys have heard about shortages in all kinds of sectors. And so that's also true right now for some of the optics supply chains. So especially materials, we're seeing really long lead times on materials and a lot of capacity constraints, because as everything is ramping back up, everyone wants things again. And so there's really increased demand. And so the quicker even if you don't need something until late this year, you probably want to start talking to your suppliers as soon as possible. And one little tidbit was interesting is right now, knock on wood, coatings actually are okay. Like we haven't seen as much capacity constraints on coating specifically. So wherever you can use existing glass, do that.
Good. Well, thanks. Yeah, that's great advice from both of you. Thank you both very much. I think this was a great conversation. I think it's important that everyone knows you are not alone. We have a team of experts here at Emin Optics, along with Nick and Kasia, who solve customer problems every day with real solutions. We thrive in optical challenges, right, Nick and Kasia?
Yes, we do.
Absolutely.
Yes. But listen, even if not with us, seek out expert advice. It's in all of our best interest to see progress in the industry, which is why we put together videos like this to facilitate learning. So Nick, Kasia, seriously, thank you. Did you both enjoy the conversation like I did?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, it was
Good. Great. All right. Well, thanks everyone. And I will see you during our next episode of Light Talk. Bye.
Bye.